You don't own land. If you want to own the land and actually own it so that even God can't touch it, you have to buy the property or the car or the jet plane, whatever it is you're buying. You have to get it under allodial title. Allodial title, you can buy a car, you can buy a jet plane, you can buy a house, but you buy it under what is called allodial title. And I've seen that done because I had a guy buy me a car not too long ago, and we went into the agency and he says, I want to buy him a car. And so the guy said, okay, and so I picked out the car I wanted, and the guy buying it for me said, we want this allodial title. And the sales manager said, fine, okay, we'll have to go back and go get the paperwork. He went back and got the special paperwork, came out and says allodial title. Allodial simply means nobody, including God or Jesus, can touch this property. You own it.
There's a basic New World Order, an Illuminati, if you will, which is primarily run by the Rothschild family. The Rothschilds financed Stalin and the takeover of Russia, the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917. They have financed the French Revolution. They financed World War II. They financed Hitler, and they were financing the U.S. So they believe in order out of chaos. You fund both sides of a war, and whichever side wins, you got their vote because you're their paymaster. You've given them their money. You control their financial supply, which means you can control the government. Okay? And you profit no matter what. Right. And also what happens is that the war stimulates the economy, so you get much more infrastructure and much more buildings coming out of it. That's why, for example, Ford Motor Company was building tank plants in Germany, which is why Hitler's Wehrmacht had the tanks. It was from Ford. When American bombers bombed Ford's tank plants in Germany, Ford personally repaid Hitler so he could rebuild the tank plants faster. Boeing actually was shipping, this has been documented, was shipping passenger airliners to South America, which were then sent to Africa, where they ripped the seats out and turned them into Hitler's bomber fleet. That was Boeing. These are American corporations. The whole idea of these big wars is a joke.
Has spent about $8 trillion on foreign wars and their consequences since September 11, and trillions more for other military operations and for supporting military bases in 70 countries. And it still isn't spending enough to support its military competition with China in the area around China. In this cycle, the richer countries eventually get deeper into debt by borrowing from poorer countries that save more. It's one of the early signs of a wealth and power shift. This started in the United States in the 1980s, when it had a per capita income 40 times that of China's, and started borrowing from Chinese who wanted to save in dollars because the dollar was the world's reserve currency. Similarly, the British borrowed a lot of money from its much poorer colonies, and the Dutch did the same at their top. If the empire begins to run out of new lenders, those holding their currency begin to look to sell and get out rather than to buy, save, lend, and get in. And the strength of the empire begins to decline. The decline. The decline comes from internal economic weakness together with internal fighting, or costly external fighting, or both. Typically, the decline comes gradually and then very suddenly. When debts become very large and there is an economic downturn, and the empire can no longer borrow the money necessary to repay its debts, the financial bubble bursts. This creates great domestic hardships and forces the country to choose between defaulting on its debts or printing a lot of new money. It always chooses to print a lot of new money, at first gradually and eventually massively. That devalues the currency and raises inflation. For the Dutch, this was the financial crisis brought about by financial excesses and paying for the Fourth Anglo-Dutch War. Similarly, for the British, it was paying for its financial excesses and its debts from the two world wars. And for the U.S., it's been 3 cycles of debt finance booms and busts since the 90s, with the central bank stepping in each time with stronger measures. When the government has problems funding itself, when there are bad economic conditions, and living standards for most people are declining, and there are large wealth, values, and political gaps, internal conflict between the rich and the poor, as
Why do people today appear so much younger than they used to? The two men pictured here in this photo from the 70s are only 17 years old. This gentleman is 45. He was 21, and these two were 23 and 44. Why did people back then look so much older than people of the same age today? In this film, the two characters are meant to be 45 years old. And in the first season of The Sopranos, Tony is the same age that I am now. So what could be causing this shift in how old people appear? Is it increased sun protection, a decrease in cigarette or alcohol consumption, or just healthier diets? One theory suggests it comes down to hydration. In the 90s, several companies started selling bottled water, and a massive push for people to start drinking water as opposed to sodas or alcohol began to rise in popularity. By 2016, water became the most popular beverage category in the world, and now bottled water accounts for 1/3 of the entire global beverage market. So could it be that we look much younger than our same-aged counterparts of the past simply because we're drinking more water? Or is something else going on?
Let me tell you something. 48 years of study, I'm going to give you a secret. Nothing in this world is what you think it is. Government does not work the way you think it does. Religion is a corporation. Especially in the Western world, all religions operate under Maritime Admiralty Law. Maritime Admiralty is the law of water. There are only two things on the earth, land and water. So there are two kinds of law, the law of the land and the law of water. The law of the land is the custom of the people who live on a particular piece of land. So the law of the land is different in every country.
Okay, got it.
But there is also a far more important law on the earth. It's called the law of the water. And that law is referred to in courts as maritime admiralty.
What are some of those laws that we're not aware of?
Oh, my goodness. When you walk into a courtroom, why do you go to court? You play basketball on a court. You play tennis on a court.
Right.
Yeah, how do you play tennis on a court? You play with a racket. Come on. And so when the judge walks out, he rules from the bench. Right? Look it up in a Latin dictionary. The word bench is a bank in Latin. And so the judge is ruling for the bank. That's why he wears a black robe, because the black robe represents the planet Saturn, the god of banking and law, who in the ancient world was called Lord of the Rings.
Wow.
Well, he is Lord of the Rings.
Right, there's rings.
And so women were told in the ancient world to listen to their god, so they would wear an ear ring. Men were to get married before their god, so they wear a wedding ring, because Saturn was Lord of the Rings.